Okay, so I'm actually excited to be talking to all of you today. I only have a few weeks left before I am headed to Mizzou, but hopefully I'm going to be really close by, so hopefully I'll be able to come visit you all if you'll take me back for a visit every once in a while. I want to start by warning you first today that I'm going to be saying the F word a lot, but it's not the F word you're thinking of. It's feminism. It could make you uncomfortable, I understand that. That's a word that can have controversy associated with it. I'm not usually nervous about public speaking, but I'm nervous today because I know that topic can be a little bit controversial. But I encourage you to just sort of sit in your discomfort today. Listen to what I have to say in these Rotary seats, and I think I'm a better person for it, so I hope you will be too if you hear me out today. I know there's not going to be enough time to say everything that I want to say today because this topic is so near and dear to my heart and something I'm very, very passionate about. And I thought that it might help you connect if you understood why it's so important to me. Even in college, I never imagined that I would consider myself a feminist, but as we all know, life can change you. And I think that's a good thing when we go through life and we experience things and we're able to evolve and adapt as we learn more. And I think that's what I've done, and so I want to share with you all today some of the things that I have learned in my professional life and in my life as a woman. So let me start by telling you, in brief, hopefully as short as I can, how I got to where I am. Why do I identify as a feminist now? There wasn't anything out of the ordinary about the way I was raised in rural Missouri. Gender roles were both coveted and celebrated as I grew up. You know, the men go to work and provide for the family, and the woman takes care of the home. Women were supposed to be diligent and kind and nurturing, pleasant, submissive. There's nothing wrong with those things, necessarily. Being kind in the face of oppression or in the face of adversity, I think, is a good thing. But there's a level when women are expected to be kind and expected to be pleasant, even when the situation doesn't warrant it. Even when they should be able to stand up for themselves, they should be able to say something. So that was how I grew up. I actually grew up I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. That was my goal. I wanted to have a huge family and do all of those things that come with it. And I still think that that's a very noble and very admirable thing to do. I really do. But two things happened in my life at the same time that came to a head and created like a perfect storm, if you will. I was working in a job that I was very passionate about. I had a lot of experience in that field, and I was very passionate about moving forward and spending my life in that field, really. And it came upon an opportunity. There was a job opening that I was excited about that I thought I'd be a good fit for. I felt like I had a lot of experience. I felt that I was very qualified. I was very passionate. And before I was even really considered for the position, I was disqualified very openly because I was female. And that was sort of a new, just because I'm female, that's the only reason, just because I'm female. There wasn't any discussion about my qualifications or any discussion about my passion. It's just you're female and you're not qualified to do this job. At the same time, I was pregnant, and in the midst of that, I found out that I was having a girl, but she was going to be female. And many of you are parents, and I'm sure you know that indignation and that fury that rises up on you on behalf of your children. When I imagined someone saying to my daughter what was said to me, I just couldn't handle it. I thought, oh my goodness, what is happening? It was shocking to me. It was also heartbreaking to me to imagine that might ever happen to her. And so that's really what began my journey of learning. I thought, I have to figure this out. I have to do some research, and I have to learn, and I have to figure out what's going on here. Why is this happening to me? Why might this happen to my daughter? And what can I do to change it? So that's where I started. Just one more caveat real quick. I say feminism. That's a word that I'm okay with, that I've come to accept, and I know not everybody does. And that's okay, because that's really not the point. I'm not here to debate, the merits of the word feminism or the feminist movement or any feminist icon, really. I think that's a distraction from the actual point. And the point is that women deserve equal representation, equal pay for equal work, equal opportunity in the workforce, equal recognition for accomplishments. That's really the point. And I think in the end, even if you don't like the word feminism, I feel that's not something that many people would disagree with, that women deserve that equal representation and equal opportunity. So let's look at some context. I have handouts that I put on your tables today, and I made handouts because I'm hoping that you'll take these home and look at them and think about them, especially if you're not familiar with some of these concepts. And in one of the first boxes in the top, I have some historical landmarks for women's rights. It was 1920 when the 19th Amendment was passed, giving women the right to vote. You may not realize that was less than 100 years ago. It's been less than 100 years since women could go and express their opinion in the ballot box. There really hasn't been that long. There may even be people we know in our families that are still alive today who were around when that was happening. In 1923, Alice Paul, who was a prominent suffragette, introduced the Equal Rights Amendment. And that would have been an amendment to the Constitution to just say, blanket, women deserve the same rights as men. And that amendment actually failed officially in 1982. It took that many years, and then it ended up even failing. So to this day, we do not have an actual equal rights amendment in our Constitution in the United States that says women are equal to men. The Equal Pay Act in 1963, that's when it became illegal for companies to pay women less than men. That happened pretty frequently. Actually, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, when she first became an attorney and she got a job, her first attorney job, they told her openly, we're not going to pay you as much as we would a man because you have a husband, and he already makes a full salary, so you don't need that much. That happened not that long ago. That was, I think, maybe in the 60s. And so in 1963, it became illegal to do that. In 1972, Title IX was passed, and initially Title IX was for sports. Women need to have the same opportunity to do sports in college as men do. Now Title IX has more implications that I think are good. It has implications about how sexual assault is handled on campuses so that women don't get hindered education or less education because they've experienced harassment or sexual assault on campus. In 1974, it became illegal to discriminate against housing or credit. Think about that, 1974, I'm going to be bad at math, a little over 30 years ago, 40 years ago? 1974. Before that, a creditor could say, nope, not eligible for credit, you're a woman. We don't think you're going to be able to pay us back, so you can't get any credit. Or they could say, you're a single woman living by yourself, I don't want to rent my house to you. You don't get to live here if you're a single woman. That was 1974, that was not that long ago. And then in 1978, that is when it officially became illegal that an employer cannot fire a woman because she's pregnant. A woman that I actually worked with at ATSU, or at Truman, I worked with her for several years. She worked in the registrar's office, and she was fired when she was pregnant. And then she got her job back after she had the baby and it was older. They rehired her, thankfully. But she was actually fired for being pregnant from Truman State University. So this history is really near to us. And while we have made a lot of progress, these are good legal progress that we have made. There's still so much. And the imprint of this is still left, I think, in our society, where there's room for us to do more work so that women get the equal representation and the equal opportunity that they deserve. And I put on there, I just brainstormed a few milestones that haven't been achieved yet. Things like having an Equal Rights Amendment in our Constitution so that it's ingrained in our Constitution. This is our identity as a country, that we believe that women are equal to men and deserve equal rights. A first female president, possibly, hopefully, someday in my lifetime. I hope that we'll have a female president. Equal pay for women and minorities. Now, I said, it became illegal for employers to pay women less than men. But crazily enough, it still happens. It still happens that women will get paid less for doing the same job. And, people can bring lawsuits to say, I'm getting paid less than a man, but you have to have the resources to do a lawsuit like that. You have to have the confidence that you're not going to suffer retaliation. There are a lot of reasons why that might not happen. So equal pay for women and minority women especially. And then equal representation in government. Also, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I'm going to law school, so yeah, I'm a little bit of a nerd, and I really like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, RBG. But one thing that she says is when people ask her, when will there be enough women on the Supreme Court? When will there be enough? And she says 9. And people think, what, 9? That's not fair. That's not equal. But she likes to remind people, how long were there 9 men on the Supreme Court? And everything was fine. People thought it was great. I think it will be an accomplishment for us if there could be 9 women on the Supreme Court, and it would just be another day. Yeah, right now there are 9 women, but it won't be like that forever. There's going to be some men come on. That's just how it is. There are 9 qualified women right now, and that's great. So that's just something to think about. Those are some milestones yet to be achieved. So why is this necessary? Does sexism still exist? This is the thing, when I talk about it, this is the thing that people come to me the most and say, like, why do you even care? We are great. We are perfectly fine here. But there are actual studies, there are facts that prove that we're not. One of the biggest ones is the pay gap. So in 2015, women in general made 80% of what men make. That's 80 cents on the dollar. So for men, they make $1, women, they make 80 cents. That's in 2015. It's even less for minority women. African Americans make 63%, African American women make 63% of what white men make, and Hispanic women make 54% of what white men make. That's a huge gap. A lot of people say that the pay gap is due, well, women just choose occupations that pay less. That might be why women make less money than men. They choose occupations that they don't make as much money. But if you look at a single occupation, for example, I put on here the financial management, women in financial management, the same kind of jobs as men, still make 65% less than men in that same field. So you can break it down by occupation. That's not why. That's not the reason. Even in the same field, women still make less than men. That's just the reality. Then there's also entertainment. There's the Bechdel test. How many people know about the Bechdel test? I really want to know. How many people have heard of that already? Know what it is? A few of you. I think I saw 4 or 5 hands. The Bechdel test is something really great. Once you know about it, every time you watch a movie, hopefully you'll be like, ooh, does this pass the Bechdel test? That doesn't mean you can't watch or enjoy a movie that doesn't. It's just something to think about, something to be aware of. The Bechdel test is if a movie has at least 2 characters who are named in it that are women, 2 female characters that are significant enough to be named, who talk to each other, have a conversation with each other about something other than a man. You think that might be a pretty low, that's going to be pretty easy to achieve, but you would be surprised at how many movies do not meet that mark. It's incredible. Think about it the next time you go to the movies or the next time you watch a movie with your family, and think about that Bechdel test. Does this pass? You'll be surprised at how many movies don't. There was a study, and I put the link. I have lots of resources. If you guys want to look these up later, I can give you resources all day long. But there's a study of 2,000 high-grossing films. According to IMDb, these films made more than $45 million, so these are popular films. They're not obscure. And over 75%, 75.7% of those films contained dialogue that was over 60% male. Males had more than 60% of the dialogue. And for women, films that were similar, films that had women with over 60% of dialogue, that was 8.6%. 8.6, compared to 75.7%. That's the entertainment field. So in every area of our society, women are still working hard to get that equal representation, to get that equal opportunity. It's still something that we have to work on. I have a couple more examples. I'm quickly running out of time. But I do just want to say one more, because this one, when I read it, I was like, this is why I have to raise my daughter to be strong and to believe in herself. There was a study by the University of Illinois that told boys and girls who are 5 years old, here's a game that is really hard, but if you try really, really hard, you can be good at this game. And here's another game that is hard, but if you're really, really smart, you can do well at this game. So 2 different games. When they were 5 years old, both boys and girls wanted to play both games eagerly. They wanted to give it a shot and see how they did. When they were 6 and 7 years old, the boys still wanted to play both games, but the girls didn't want to play the smart games anymore. They only wanted to play the games that they had to try really, really hard. That's the sort of thing that gets ingrained into our children because of how we are in this society. It's not something that people really overtly say. They don't say to little girls, boys are smarter, girls are not as smart, but they still get that message. And some people might still say it. There are still people in the world, that is the thing to know, there are still people in the world who say that. Hopefully, though, in general, most of us wouldn't. But girls, even if people don't say that to them, they still get that message. Girls aren't as interested in the smart game anymore. And then one more study that I will mention. There was a study of, it had to do with internal medicine grand rounds. So, if you're a resident or if you're practicing internal medicine, for professional development, they do grand rounds where speakers come in and give presentations. And they did a study on introductions of doctors who were presenting. So they studied both if a woman introduced the speaker and the speaker were a doctor. 57 of 60 cases, so 95%, those male doctors were introduced as Dr. So-and-so. In 45 of 46 cases, 97%, female doctors were introduced as Dr. So-and-so. That's when a woman is introducing someone. Then, when a man was introducing them, in 110 of 152 cases of a man being the speaker, 72% of doctors were introduced as Dr. So-and-so when it was a man. That's when a man was doing the introducing. I hope you're following me. But in 31 of 63 cases, only 49%, if the woman was a doctor, was she introduced as doctor, if a man was introducing her. Less than half. That's crazy. I would almost guarantee you, if you went to those doctors who were doing the introduction and you said, hey, you didn't introduce that woman as a doctor, they would say, oh, I didn't mean anything by it. I don't feel about men and women any differently. No big deal. I have a lot of respect for her as a doctor. And I believe them. I believe that that's true. The point is that we have these things ingrained in us. We don't even realize that they're there. And so having awareness and having knowledge of them is something that can help us move forward. So what exactly are we talking about when we talk about sexism? Well, most people think of hostile sexism when we talk about it. They think like people who say women are not as smart as men. Women don't deserve as much as men. Those overt things, or even hostile things, like it's okay to beat a woman. That would be hostile sexism. And that happens. That's still true. But what is more subtle and what is not often as noticed, but happens much more often, is benevolent sexism. And that's the sort of idea that, that chivalry type of thing, which, a lot of people say, what's the matter with that? What's wrong with chivalry? Like, that's kind, that's great. It's good to open a door for a woman. It's good to help her with things. But the thing is that it perpetuates the idea that men need to take care of women, that they're weaker, and that men need to take care of them. That doesn't mean you can't be kind or that you can't open the door for a woman, but maybe consider just opening the door for a man too, or anybody who might be coming up. There's no reason that a woman really needs to have the door open for her. That's a sort of example of benevolent sexism, but there are many, many more. I'm going to go through some examples real quick of how we see this play out in culture, really concrete examples. So the women's soccer team, how many of you are familiar with that story? They sued because they were getting paid about 40% less than the male soccer team. And they had won 3 World Cup titles. And how many had the men won? They had more viewers, they had amassed more fans, and they were still getting paid 40% less. That's one example, still happening today. Headlines in the news. There was a headline, I think just last week, by the New York Times. Doctor opens fire, killing woman and 6 others. Guess what? That woman was a doctor. The killer, who was a man, was still labeled as a doctor, but the woman, even though she was a doctor, was labeled as a woman. From the Olympics, in big, bold headlines, Phelps ties for silver in 100 fly. In small print below it, Ledecky, a woman, sets world record in 800-meter freestyle. He gets second place. He gets big, bold inches of letters. She gets like this much for setting a world record. One more. Wife of Bears lineman wins bronze medal today in Rio Olympics. Wife of Bears lineman, rather than referring to her as 3-time Olympian Corey Cogdell. She's the wife. And then one that I also pay attention to a lot is when I watch the news and how people talk about women in the news. Recently, a female senator, when she was questioning someone in a hearing, the news called her hysterical. It's such a gendered term, hysterical. Had you ever heard men referred to as hysterical? And by the way, she was not doing anything that would have qualified as hysterical. But that's just what happens. And then there are like the everyday examples. You may not encounter things like that in your everyday life here in Kirksville, Missouri, but there are still things that you do encounter. For example, interrupting women in conversation. There are studies, I don't have them cited with me today, but there are studies that women get interrupted in conversations significantly more than men. Noticing and commenting on a woman's looks or personality. Here's the thing, if you wouldn't say something to a man, you probably shouldn't say it to a woman, especially in a professional setting. If you're in a professional situation, and especially if it's a woman that you're not familiar with, and you say something like, "Oh, you look so beautiful today," but you wouldn't walk up to a man and say, "Oh, you look so handsome today. I just love your smile." That's an example of benevolent sexism. Okay, so what is the result of discrimination? What is the extreme? What is the end result? I have on the handout that I gave you, there's a pyramid. And it's a pyramid, you can quibble with the words that are on there, but it's an example. At the bottom, there are jokes. Boys will be boys, unequal pay. And then what it builds to, what it leads to up at the top. Unequal representation and discrimination is what leads to violence towards women, sexual assault. It's those mindsets that get you there. And I know so many of you would say, I would never support that. I don't support that. I would never support that. I 100% believe you. No one would. No one would openly support that. That's ridiculous. But violence is built on a foundation that doesn't give equal respect and equal rights to women. And even well-intended compliments or good intentions can still lead to a perception and to a mindset that makes those things okay. You even see it play out in sports. For example, football. We all know the stories of domestic violence in football, and yet those football players still come back and they still play football and they still make a ton of money. The day when a football player abuses his wife and he's done for, that just nobody will support him. Maybe not even get fired, but just fans will say, "I don't want to even watch that football player anymore." That'll be a day when we've achieved something. And these are just in the United States. All over the world. I like to think about it this way. When one boat rises, all boats rise, right? When the water comes up, all boats rise. All around the world, women experience things that are so much more extreme than this. In Saudi Arabia, women are not allowed to drive. They cannot have a driver's license. In India, when a girl is menstruating, there's a practice where they have to go to a menstruation hut. It's basically a shack outside of the house when they're menstruating. And girls frequently die. One died of a snake bite last week. And last year, one died of smoke inhalation because it was the winter and she was cold. She lit a fire and she died in a menstruation hut. Women are not given education. Think of Malala Yousafzai. I hope how many know Malala Yousafzai? Yes, That's fantastic. She has won a Nobel Prize, but the reason she's famous is because she was shot going to school. The Taliban shot her while she was on her way to school. Women are not given education because they're supposed to stay home, they're supposed to be quiet. So these are the things that are happening all over the world. It's even more extreme. And when one boat rises, all boats rise. That's why I think it's still important to fight the small battles, to pay attention to what's happening, and to do what you can, even in the small ways, even on the local level. So what can this club do? I think awareness is the big one, hopefully. Just letting me be here today and talk to you has brought maybe some awareness to issues that you didn't realize were really tangible and real things. The other thing is to consider your audience. Think about the women in your lives. Think about the women who are here in this club and, what they might be going through and how you can maybe just respect them in the audience and their participation. Be professional, of course. Like I said before, don't say anything to a woman that you wouldn't say to a man. If you're not going to comment on a man's personality or a man's smile, things like that, in a professional setting. Of course I want my friends. When there's camaraderie and when that's built up, that's a totally different ballgame. But in a professional setting, especially when you're not acquainted with a woman, that's when those things really display a sexist mindset. We could even, as a club, take on a cause and be proactive. If I knew that I was going to stick around a thing that we could do, maybe internationally, to work on these things, then maybe you could still do that. And then take my handouts home, think about them. If you have questions, I'd love to talk to any of you. I'm here for a few more weeks. If you wanted to chat and talk about it, if you're like, Rebecca, you're crazy, this is ridiculous, I'd still love to talk to you. I'd love to talk even more, if that's the case. But even now, I'm still timid about using the word feminism. One of my good friends, when this first started happening, I would talk to him, and when I first told him, I think I'm going to be feminist now, he said, oh my gosh, Rebecca, don't say that. You're going to make it so much further if you don't alienate yourself by using that word. And then about 18 months later, he was getting into my car, and he picked up a book off my seat, and I said, hey, you should read that book. I'm going to loan it to you. Read that book. Just be careful. It's going to make you a feminist. And he said, incredulously, he said to me, I'm a feminist? And I felt so triumphant. That was like one of the best moments. He, of course, did not give me any credit for that, but it made me so happy. And even a good friend from this club, when I first started talking about feminism, he thought, feminists are man-haters, militant sort of thing. He may still think that about most feminists, I don't know. But he listened to me. He started paying attention. He started to observe. And recently he said to me that he was, observing something, and he thought to himself, she's right. I see it. Now that I'm paying attention, I see it. I get it. So just don't let the political connotations of feminism or the violent or the divisive rhetoric prevent you from hearing what's important today, which is that whether they are old or young, racial or ethnic minorities, Christian, Muslim, atheists, whether they meet conventional beauty standards or don't, all women deserve the same respect and deference given to men for all of history. And they deserve equal pay for equal work, equal representation in the law, workforce, business, science and technology, government, entertainment. Women deserve that everywhere. And we have a lot of work to achieve this, but I'm hoping that maybe you'll be willing to join me in that fight. Thank you.